All right, Algebra 1B students. Welcome to part 2 of lesson 10.4 on solving radical equations. Again, we're solving equations with a square root in them, with a square root involved. So we're solving by squaring both sides. Now, today we're going to deal with this important note from our last video, answers that don't actually work in the equation. So these are answers that you get for x when you solve, but don't actually work when you plug them back into the equation. And here's why this works. It's because when we have this original equation, say x equals 3, and we square both sides like we do so often, we've now turned that equation into x squared equals 9. And it looks like 3 and negative 3 will both work, but remember our original equation only had x equal to 3, which means negative 3 doesn't actually satisfy our original equation because negative 3 does not equal 3. They're different numbers. So for the purposes of this section, and really for the rest of this chapter, we are only going to be dealing with positive square roots, okay? So we can forget the plus or minus thing, all right? So what that means is the square root of 9 for our purposes is 3, okay? The square root of 16 for our purposes is 4. Not negative 4, not negative 3, none of the negative stuff anymore, okay? So let's get into an equation that actually has one of these solutions so we can see what they look like. Here we're being asked to find the solution of n equals the square root of n plus 12. Now notice on the right side of our equal sign, the square root or the radical is all alone. It's all by itself. So we can just square both sides of this equation and get rid of that square root. So I'm going to square this side, get rid of the square root symbol, and then obviously I have to square the left side as well. The left side now becomes n squared, the right side now becomes n plus 12 because my square root symbol went away. Okay. Now, I have an n squared in this equation, which means it's a quadratic equation. So we have to go back to chapter 9 and think back to how we solve quadratic equations. Now, in order to do that, we have to get everything to one side. So I'll take away n and take away 12. So I have n squared minus n minus 12 is equal to 0. Remember, we always need it to equal 0 if we want to solve. And now this is one that I can factor. I can solve this by factoring because two numbers that multiply to be negative 12 and add to be negative 1, well, that's negative 4 and positive 3 are equal to 0. Okay? So I've factored that equation, that expression, into n minus 4 and n plus 3. So now my two options are n minus 4 equals 0 or n plus 3 equals 0. And if I solve both of those, I end up here. N equals 4 by adding 4 to both sides, or minus 3 to both sides, and n is equal to negative 3. Those are my two answers, but I need to check both of them back in my original equation. Okay? So if I check the 4, here's what I'm looking for. 4 equals the square root of 4 plus 12. Well, 4 plus 12 is 16, and the square root of 16, yes, that is 4. Check. Now here, with the negative 3, that equation now looks like negative 3 equals square root of negative 3 plus 12. And negative 3 then equals the square root of 9. Now remember, in this section we only want positive square roots, so the square root of 9 for our purposes is not negative 3. It is not negative 3. It's not. Okay? So the negative 3 here did not actually work. That is an extraneous solution. So this negative 3 I will cancel out, and my answer is n equals 4. Just n equals 4. That's the only one that worked. N equals negative 3 did not work. Okay? But the answer there still is n equals 4. That one certainly does work. Now, in this equation, I'm going to solve the same way by getting the square root all by itself and then squaring both sides of the equal sign. So I'll start by taking away 8 from both sides. And I am left with now square root of 3y is equal to a negative 6. Square root of 3y is equal to a negative 6. Now that the square root is all alone on the left side of the equal sign, I feel okay squaring both sides and getting rid of this square root. Now, the left side says 3y, and the right side says negative 6 squared, or negative 6 times negative 6. Well, negative 6 times negative 6 is 36, which means my y must equal 12. Y must equal 12. So now if I put 12 back into my original equation, back in there, I end up with square root of 3 times 12 plus 8 equals 2. Well, 3 times 12 is 36. The square root of 36, for our purposes, is 6. 6 plus 8 equals 2. No, it does not. 6 plus 8 does not equal 2, meaning y equals 12 does not actually work. And that was the only option I had for y. It had to equal 12. It does not. So I have no solution. No solution. All right, so sometimes all of your answers will be extraneous. That's why we have to check every one. Sometimes they will all disappear. Not all the time, but sometimes they will. All right, I would like you to take a look at this problem here. Notice, please, that you're asked to find the solution of negative y equals square root of y plus 6. The first step is to square both sides, which I will help you with. Squaring both sides gives me a positive y squared there, equals y plus 6. So this is one where we need to solve a quadratic by factoring, and plug our answers back in. So pause the video, take a look at solving this equation here, and then plug the answers back into our original, and we'll see what we get. Okay, when we solve, we should factor into y minus 3 and y plus 2 equals 0, which means y equals 3 or y equals negative 2. If we put 3 into our equation, remember that the beginning was a negative y. So now it says negative 3 is equal to square root of 3 plus 6. Again, we get that negative 3 is equal to the square root of 9. That's not true. The square root of 9 is 3. So y equals 3 actually does not work. That is an extraneous solution. If I put negative 2 in there, remember that it was negative y in the beginning. So it's negative negative 2. Negative negative 2 means positive 2 is equal to the square root of negative 2 plus 6. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Does 2 equal the square root of 4? Yes, it does. So y equals negative 2 is the correct answer. One of them was extraneous, the other one was not. If you have questions about what is or is not extraneous, please make a note to ask me in class tomorrow. Otherwise, that's all I have for you for now. Have a wonderful night.